The town of Rockridge sat in a kind of gentle sleep, cradled by low hills that turned golden in the summer and bare in the winter. It was a place where most things stayed the same, and people liked it that way. The heart of that steadiness was the sheriff's office, a squat brick building on Main Street. And the heart of the sheriff's office was Edward Vance. Everyone called him Ed. He was a big man, not just in height, but in the way he filled a room. His handshake was firm, his smile was slow, and his eyes had a way of looking at you that made you want to tell the truth. He'd been sheriff for 18 years, following in his own father's footsteps. He knew every back road, every farmer, and every story. He wasn't just the law. He was part of the landscape, as trusted as the old oak in the town square. His family was part of that picture, too. His wife, a kind woman with a warm laugh, taught 3rd grade. And then there was Chloe. If Ed was the steady oak, Chloe was a sunbeam. She was 22, home for the summer from university, where she was studying biology. She saw the world differently than her dad. Where he saw a working farm, she saw an ecosystem. But they loved each other fiercely. She'd tease him about his stubborn ways, and he'd pretend to grumble about her big city ideas, his eyes always shining with pride. She worked part-time at the local animal shelter, and it wasn't unusual to see her walking a dog down Main Street, stopping to chat with everyone. Ed's right-hand men were Deputy Carl Larson and Deputy Mike Briggs. They'd been with him for over a decade, their loyalty as solid as the ground they walked on. Larson was the serious one, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had a rule for everything and believed in order above all else. Briggs was bigger, louder, with a friendly clap on the back that could knock the wind out of you. He followed Larson's lead like a shadow. The three of them had a rhythm. Mornings started with coffee in Ed's office, talking about the overnight reports, the weather, high school football. It was a comfortable routine. They were more than colleagues. They were a unit. They'd been through difficult situations together, bad accidents, the occasional messy domestic call, searching for lost hikers in the hills. They trusted each other with their lives. Ed saw himself in them, straightforward, no nonsense, dedicated to protecting their own. Lately, some of their coffee talk had taken a turn. It started when the county hospital brought in a new chief of emergency medicine, a doctor named Aries Thorne. Dr. Thorne was from a big city, recruited to modernize the sleepy. Underfunded he was brilliant, everyone said so, but he was different. He didn't wear the usual rumpled doctor's coat. His was always crisp. He spoke in clear, precise sentences, without the slow, familiar drawl of Rockridge. He was a man who looked you directly in the eye and expected you to keep up. And he was openly gay, living quietly with his partner, a writer who kept to himself. To Larson and Briggs, Dr. Thorne was a puzzle they didn't want to solve. Saw the good doctor at the grocery store, Briggs might say, stirring his coffee. Buying some kind of fancy cheese. Had a whole basket of greens. Not a single normal thing in there? He'd chuckle. Larson would grunt, not looking up from his report. Met him at the scene of the Miller boys' bike accident last week. Told me my first responder protocol was antiquated. Used that word. Antiquated. Who talks like that? Ed would listen, sometimes offering a neutral. He's supposed to be a top-notch doctor. That's what the board said. Being book-smart is one thing, Larson would counter, his voice low. But in a crisis, you need someone with grit. Someone who understands real people. Not someone who's going to worry about the right medical jargon while a person's bleeding out. The comments became a background noise. They called him the professor, or when they thought Ed was out of earshot, other, uglier names. They questioned his hands, saying they were too soft for real work. They mocked the way he organized his trauma bay, calling it obsessive. Their dislike was a slow, steady drip, fed by the fact that Thorne was an outsider who showed no interest in becoming an insider. He was there to do a job, and he wanted the tools to do it right, which meant asking the county council for new equipment requests that Sheriff Vance's department often had to compete with for funding. Ed heard it all. Part of him understood. Larson and Briggs were men of action. They valued instinct, toughness, a kind of proven physical reliability. Dr. Thorne's world of advanced protocols and sterile efficiency felt foreign to them, almost like a criticism of their own way of doing things. Ed saw it as a simple clash of cultures, the old guard wary of the new. He'd quietly defend the doctor's credentials if it went too far, but mostly he let it slide. They were good men, his men. Their loyalty was to him and to the town. A little grumbling about a newcomer was harmless. It was just talk. He believed this right up until the day he had lunch with Chloe at the town diner. She was excited, talking about a lecture on emergency field medicine she'd attended online. "You know, Dad," she said, wiping ketchup from her chin, "Dr. Thorne actually helped set up that course. He's a legend in trauma circles. We read one of his papers in class. The guy's a genius." Ed smiled, amused by her passion. "Is that right?" "Yeah. Mom said the deputies don't like him much." "That's so dumb." Chloe's face was earnest. "If I ever got hurt, like really hurt, he's the one I'd want. You should hear the nurses talk. They say he's the only thing keeping that AA from falling apart." Ed felt a faint, unfamiliar twinge. It was the first time the two halves of his world, his daughter's clear-eyed respect and his deputy's muttered contempt, had directly collided. He reached across the table and patted her hand. "Well, let's make sure you don't get hurt, genius or not. Finish your fries." That night, sitting on his porch, Ed thought about it. He thought about Larson's stony certainty and Briggs's loud loyalty. He thought about Chloe's bright, trusting face. And he thought about Dr. Thorne, a man alone in a new place, trying to build something better. He decided, not for the first time, that the town was big enough for all of them. His deputy's prejudice was just noise. It wouldn't affect their work. It couldn't. They were professionals. They were family, the pillars of his community, his family, his duty, his trusted team all felt solid under the wide Rockridge sky. He had built this, tended to it. He believed in it with every fiber of his being. The idea that a crack, born from simple, stupid dislike, could run through it all and bring it crashing down was something Sheriff Edward Vance could not even begin to imagine. The rain started just after sundown, a soft drizzle at first that quickly hardened into a steady, cold pour. It painted the blacktop of County Road 7 slick and shiny under the headlights of the cars leaving town. Inside the sheriff's office, the evening was quiet. Ed Vance was finishing paperwork, the sound of the rain on the roof a peaceful rhythm. His deputies, Larson and Briggs, were out on patrol, their radio chatter occasional and calm. Chloe Vance had spent the afternoon at the animal shelter. A nervous terrier mix had just been adopted, and she'd stayed late to help it get settled. She was driving her old sedan, the one her dad had checked over himself just last week. The wipers beat a steady tempo as she hummed along to the radio, thinking about her plans for the weekend with friends. She took the curve on Route 7, the one near the old Miller farm, a road she'd driven 100 times. From the opposite direction, a pickup truck weaved across the center line. Inside, a man who had spent too many hours at the Rusty Nail Bar was fighting to focus, his world blurred and slow. He didn't see the curve. He didn't see the glint of headlights approaching. As Chloe's car came around the bend, the truck was squarely in her lane, a wall of metal and glass dot there was no time to break. The sound was terrible, a screaming tear of metal, the explosive shatter of glass, and then a silence that was immediately filled by the hiss of rain on hot wreckage. The call crackled over the radio in the sheriff's office. The dispatcher's voice tight. All units, motor vehicle accident, high impact, Route 7 at the Miller Farm Bend. Reports of a person trapped. Ed's blood went cold. Route 7. That was Chloe's way home from the shelter. He was on his feet, his chair slamming back into the wall, before the dispatcher finished. He grabbed the mic, his voice a forced calm. "Dispatch, this is Vance. I'm en route. Confirm vehicles involved." Before dispatch could answer, Larson's voice cut in, sharp and clear. "We're 2 minutes out, Sheriff. We see the smoke." Ed's heart hammered against his ribs. He ran for his truck, the rain soaking his shirt in seconds. As he sped through the empty streets, his mind was a frantic prayer. Asterisk, not her. Please, not her. Asterisk, Larson and Briggs were the first to arrive. The scene was a nightmare, lit by swirling red and blue lights. The pickup truck was wrapped around a telephone pole, the driver moaning inside. But it was the small sedan that made Briggs suck in a breath. It was crushed on the driver's side. The shape barely recognizable Dot Larson was already moving, his training locking in. He went to the sedan's window, now a jagged hole. Inside, he saw a flash of color the blue sweater Chloe was wearing. Her head was tilted, blood matting her blonde hair. Her breathing was a wet, ragged sound that didn't seem right. "It's the sheriff's girl," Larson said, his voice low and flat. Briggs's face paled. "Oh, God, is she?" "She's alive. But it's bad. Real bad." Larson's mind was racing. This wasn't just any victim. This was Chloe. This was family. He keyed his shoulder mic, his voice urgent but controlled. "Dispatch, this is Unit 2. We have a Code 3 trauma at Route 7 and Miller. 2 vehicles, 1 driver critical. Confirm life flight availability and notify County Hospital A. The critical victim is Chloe Vance. I repeat, Chloe Vance." The name did its work. In the dispatch center, the room snapped to a different kind of attention. The sheriff's daughter. The radio traffic instantly cleared. The dispatcher's voice came back. "Unit 2, life flight is grounded due to weather. Ambulance Alpha is 5 minutes from your location. County Hospital A is being notified now." Larson knelt by the wreck. He could see the way Chloe's body was positioned, the unnatural angle of her leg, the shallow, rapid rise and fall of her chest. This was beyond a broken bone. This was internal. This needed a surgeon, and fast. Briggs was trying to talk to Chloe, to keep her conscious, but her eyes were fluttering. UNSEEING. The ambulance arrived, its siren cutting off as it slid to a stop. The 2 paramedics, a seasoned woman and a younger man, jumped out. They took in the scene, the deputies' grim faces, and got to work. As they carefully began the delicate process of extracting Chloe from the wreckage, Larson pulled the lead paramedic aside. "Listen," Larson said, his voice low, almost drowned by the rain. "That's Sheriff Vance's daughter. You understand? We need the absolute best for her. Nothing can go wrong." The paramedic nodded, her face professional. "We're taking her to county. Dr. Thorne is on duty. He's the best trauma guy we've got." At the name, Larson's jaw tightened. He looked back at the car, at Briggs's panicked eyes, at Chloe's pale, still face. A storm of thoughts raged in his head. Thorne, the professor. The man with the soft hands and the big words. The man who didn't belong here. The image of him leaning over Chloe, with his cool clinical efficiency, felt like a betrayal. This wasn't a textbook case. This was Chloe. She needed someone with guts, someone who'd fight in the trenches, not someone who'd think about it. Briggs came over, his voice a hissed whisper. "They're taking her to county." To him. Larson didn't answer for a moment. He watched the paramedics slide a backboard under Chloe, her body limp. He made a decision. It wasn't a grand, evil plan. It was a gut call, born from a lifetime of trusting his own instincts and distrusting anything that felt foreign. It was the belief that he knew better. He stepped back to the lead paramedic as they were loading the gurney. "Change of plan," Larson said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He tapped the county logo on her sleeve. "You're to divert to Memorial Hospital. Take the bypass." The paramedic paused, confused. "Memorial? Sir, county is 12 minutes closer. They're expecting us. Dr. Thorne is prepped." "I'm aware of the protocols," Larson said, his voice hardening. He was using his official voice, the one that commanded obedience. Memorial's trauma lead, Dr. Phelps, is ex-military. He's seen real combat trauma. This is a complex, messy injury. We need a steady hand, not just a theoretical one. This is a direct order. Sheriff Vance would want this. Do you understand? He leaned on the weight of the sheriff's name, on the unspoken threat of going against a senior deputy in a crisis. The paramedic looked from Larson's stony face to her critical patient. Protocol said go to the nearest appropriate facility. County was nearer, and it had the better-equipped A, but a deputy was giving a direct order, citing the sheriff's preference. The chain of command in the field was muddled, heavy. I need to confirm with dispatch," she said, hesitating. "There's no time." Briggs barked, adding his pressure. "Just drive. We'll clear it with dispatch. Go." The paramedic, under the twin pressures of a dying girl and 2 commanding officers, made a choice. She gave a sharp nod to her partner. "Memorial. Go." Lights and sirens. The ambulance doors slammed shut. With a new urgency, it pulled away, its tires throwing up water, turning not towards the glow of town where County Hospital stood, but onto the darker county bypass that led to the smaller, quieter Memorial Hospital 20 minutes further on. Larson watched the taillights disappear into the rainy gloom. He felt a surge of certainty. He'd done the right thing. He'd gotten Chloe to a real doctor, a soldier, someone who wouldn't fold under pressure. He keyed his mic again. "Dispatch, Ambulance Alpha is en route to Memorial Hospital with the critical victim. Advise Memorial of inbound trauma." In the dispatch center, there was a beat of stunned silence. The dispatcher knew the protocols backward and forward. This was wrong. But the deputy's voice was absolute. "Copy, Unit 2, notifying Memorial." She made the call, a knot of worry forming in her stomach. At that moment, Sheriff Ed Vance's truck skidded to a halt at the edge of the chaos. He threw the door open, his eyes wide with terror, searching frantically for the ambulance, for his daughter. He saw only the wreckage and the 2 soaked figures of his deputies. "Where is she?" He yelled, running toward them. "Where's Chloe?" Larson met him, putting a steadying hand on his arm. "She's on her way to Memorial, Sheriff. Briggs and I made the call. Phelps is on duty. He's a rock. She's in the best hands." Ed stared at him, the rain streaming down his face. Memorial? A confusion cut through his panic. But the raw, unwavering certainty in Larson's eyes was like a lifeline. In his shattered state, he clung to it. His men had taken control. They had made a decision. He trusted them. He had to. He didn't ask why. He just nodded, a shaky, grateful nod, and turned to run back to his truck, to follow the ambulance that was now racing in the wrong direction. Every second on the wet road pulling his daughter further from the man who could have saved her. Dr. Aris Thorne was in the middle of what he called the quiet storm. The ER at County Hospital was calm, but he was a whirlwind of preparation. A trauma alert had been called in. The sheriff's own daughter. Critical. He felt the familiar, cold focus settle over him. the kind that shut out everything but the patient and the problem. He moved through the bright, sterile bay, his voice calm but leaving no room for doubt. "Okay, people, we have an ETA of 12 minutes. Young female, high speed lateral impact. Suspect major thoracic and abdominal trauma. We'll need ultrasound immediately. Large bore IVs ready. And get blood typing started the second she's through the door. Call the OR. Tell them we have a probable bleed and to have a table prepped." His team, nurses and techs, who had learned to trust his quiet intensity, snapped into motion. He glanced at the clock. He should be hearing sirens any minute. He stood by the wide, automatic doors, looking out into the rainy night, mentally running through scenarios. A liver laceration? A ruptured spleen? A torn aorta? His hands, which Larson and Briggs had called soft, flexed slightly. They were steady. They were ready. Across town, inside the speeding ambulance, the storm was anything but quiet. The paramedic, Karen, worked furiously over Chloe's still form. The monitor beeped a frantic, unstable rhythm. Chloe's blood pressure was dropping. Way too fast. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with us," Karen murmured, adjusting the oxygen mask. She looked at her partner driving. "How much longer?" 8 minutes, maybe 9 in this mess," he called back, the wipers slapping at full speed. 9 minutes. Karen felt a sick twist in her gut. They should already be at County. They should already be handing her off to Thorne and his team. Memorial was a good hospital, but it was small. It didn't have the same level of trauma resources. It didn't have a Dr. Thorne. She pushed the thought away and focused on keeping Chloe alive for the next 9 minutes. Back at County, the minutes ticked by. 12 became 15. No sirens. Dr. Thorne checked his watch, a faint line appearing between his brows. He walked to the trauma desk. "Has there been an update on the Vance ETA?" The nurse at the computer shook her head. "No, doctor. Their signal went off route a few minutes ago. Maybe they had to slow down for the weather?" A cold trickle, different from clinical focus, started in Thorne's stomach. He pulled up the ambulance GPS tracking on the computer screen. The little icon representing the ambulance wasn't on the main highway heading into town. It was on the county bypass, moving steadily away from them, toward the northern part of the county. "Where are they going?" he said, more to himself than anyone. He picked up the direct line to dispatch. "This is Dr. Thorne at County E. Can you confirm the transport destination for the Vance trauma? Our tracking shows them on the bypass." The dispatcher's voice was hesitant. Yes, doctor. We were advised by the deputies on scene that transport was diverted to Memorial Hospital." The words didn't make sense at first. Diverted? On whose authority? Who advised that? Thorne's voice was sharp now. "The deputy on scene, sir. He said it was a direct order. That Memorial was prepared." Thorne put the phone down slowly. He felt a hot rush of anger, followed immediately by a colder, deeper dread. He knew Dr. Phelps at Memorial. A good man, a competent general surgeon. But he was not a trauma specialist. Memorial didn't have an interventional radiology team on standby. Their blood bank was limited. This wasn't a medical decision. This was something else. And in the middle of that something else was a young woman who was, right now, dying in the back of an ambulance going the wrong way. He grabbed the phone again, his fingers dialing Memorial's A number from memory. It rang and rang again. At Memorial Hospital, the scene was one of controlled panic. They'd gotten the heads-up late. Dr. Phelps, a man in his 50s with a tired but kind face, was scrambling. His AR was half the size of County's. A nurse was just wheeling the ultrasound machine into the trauma bay when the doors burst open and the ambulance crew rushed. Chloe in, female, 22 high-speed MVA, Suspected internal bleeding. BP is 70/40 and falling. Karen rattled off, helping transfer Chloe to the bed. Dr. Phelps moved in. He saw the pallor, the shallow breathing. He placed the ultrasound probe on Chloe's abdomen. The screen lit up with a terrifying, swirling blackness. Free fluid. A lot of it. Blood was filling her abdominal cavity from a major vessel tear. "Okay, we need to get her to surgery now," Phelps said, his voice tense. "Get me 4 units of O-negative stat. And call the OR. Tell them we're coming up for an exploratory laparotomy." But it wasn't that simple. His one OR was finishing up a routine appendix removal. It would be 20 minutes before they could turn it over and set up for a major trauma case. 20 minutes. He started barking orders for medications to support her crashing blood pressure, for warmer fluids. He was doing everything by the book, but the book here was thinner, and the clock was screaming. His phone rang at the nursing station. A nurse answered, listened, and called out, "Doctor, it's Dr. Thorne from County." Phelps didn't have time for calls, but something in the nurse's tone made him wave. "Bring it here." He put the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Chloe. "Phelps." "Alan, it's a Reese Thorne." "You have the Vance girl?" "Just got her. She's full of blood. We're trying to stabilize for OR. What's your OR time?" Thorne's voice was clipped, urgent. 25 minutes, Phelps said, injecting a medication into Chloe's 4. There was a beat of silence on the line. Thorne was doing the same math he was. "Alan, listen to me. With that injury, she doesn't have 25 minutes. You need to clamp that bleed now. Can you do a bedside thoracotomy if it's thoracic? Can you access her aorta?" Phelps felt a sweat break out on his forehead that had nothing to do with the heat of the lights. He was a good surgeon, but a bedside procedure like that, in an A not set up for it, with a team not drilled for it, it was a huge, desperate risk. "Reese, my team isn't. We're not equipped for that level of—" "Then put her back in the ambulance and send her to me right now," Thorne cut in, his voice low and fierce. "I am prepped and ready. My OR is standing by. I can have her on the table in 8 minutes from when she arrives. Every minute she's there without definitive care, she's dying." Phelps looked down at Chloe. Her skin was the color of chalk. The monitor screened a warning her heart was starting to beat too fast, too thin. He was a proud man, but he was a doctor first. He knew Thorne was right, that he made a decision. "Okay, we'll transport. We'll keep her alive that long. Get ready." He slammed the phone down. "Stop everything. We're not going to OR here. We're moving her. Back to the ambulance now. Keep those pressure bags going." There was a stunned moment, then a flurry of activity as lines and monitors were hastily resecured. Karen and her partner, who had just been catching their breath, stared in disbelief. They were going back? After all this? It took 3 precious, clumsy minutes to get Chloe loaded back into the ambulance. As they slammed the doors, Dr. Phelps yelled to the driver, "Lights and sirens. County Hospital. Go like hell." The ambulance tore out of Memorial's Bay, now heading back the way it came. Inside, Karen fought to keep Chloe stable, but the girl was slipping away. The brief stop, the movement, had cost her. Her blood pressure was now almost unreadable. At County, Thorne received the call. "They're coming back. ETA 10 minutes. He turned to his team, his face a mask of grim determination. "They're inbound. It's worse now. We've lost almost half an hour. Be ready for anything." He walked back to the doors, watching the empty, rain-slicked street. The sirens he heard now were not the ones he'd expected before. They were the sirens of a mistake racing back to him, carrying its consequence in the back of a speeding vehicle. He thought of the sheriff, of the deputies he'd seen sneering in the hallway. This wasn't just an accident anymore. It was a choice. And he was about to see the full, terrible cost of it laid out on his trauma table. The quiet in the eyes gone, replaced by a heavy, waiting silence, broken only by the distant, growing wail of the sirens finally coming home. The days that followed were a blur of a kind of pain Ed Vance had never imagined. It had a physical weight, like a stone lodged in his chest where his heart used to be. The funeral was a sea of faces, of uniforms, of soft words that meant nothing. He stood beside his wife, holding her up because if he didn't, he would fall. He saw Larson and Briggs there, their faces drawn with the grief he once would have believed was as real as his own. They came to him after, gripping his shoulder, their eyes red-rimmed. "We're so sorry, Ed," Larson said, his voice thick. "We thought we were doing the right thing." Ed looked at him into those familiar, steady eyes, and he just nodded. The trust was a habit, a deep groove worn over 18 years. In his shattered state, the habit held. He believed they had made a terrible, tragic mistake, a bad call in a moment of panic. He almost found a way to blame himself for it. Asterisk, I should have been there sooner. I should have taken charge. Asterisk, but the stone in his chest had a sharp edge. And that edge was the word Dr. Thorne had used. Delay. A week after they buried Chloe, Ed forced himself to go back to the office. He thought routine might help. The familiar walls, the smell of old coffee. His deputies were there, quiet, respectful. They gave him space. He sat at his desk, staring at the clean surface where her school photo had been. He needed to understand. Not to blame, just to understand the sequence of the disaster. He called the head of EMS into his office. He asked, gently at first, for the incident report, the radio logs, the ambulance run sheet. The EMS director, a serious woman named Gina, brought him the file. Her face was carefully neutral. "It's all there, Sheriff," she said, placing it on his desk. It was a chaotic night. He waited until she left. He opened the file. He read the paramedic's narrative. The words were clinical, but he read between the lines. Asterisk, deputy on scene directed diversion to Memorial Hospital, citing deputy's preference for on-call surgeon. Advised that Sheriff Vance would want this. Asterisk, a cold finger traced down his spine. He had wanted no such thing. He hadn't even known. He turned to the radio log transcript. It was a timeline of his nightmare. He saw the initial call, the identification of Chloe, the dispatch to county. Then he saw Larson's transmission diverting the ambulance. And then his own voice, filled with panic, asking where she was. And Larson's response, asterisk, she's on her way to Memorial, Sheriff. Briggs and I made the call. Phelps is on duty. He's a rock. She's in the best hands. Asterisk, he read it again. We made the call. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking in the silent room. The sharp edge of the stone pressed deeper. This wasn't just a mistake made in the fog of war. This was a conscious decision, a choice to send his daughter away from the designated trauma center. But why? The question, which had been a whisper, now became a drumbeat in his skull. He stood up and walked out of his office, the file in his hand. Briggs was at his desk, looking at a computer screen. He looked up, saw Ed's face, and something in his own expression shifted, a flicker of unease. "Mike," Ed said, his voice oddly calm. "My office. Now, get Carl, too." A few minutes later, they sat across from him, the two men he had trusted with his life. He didn't sit behind the desk. He leaned against it, looking down at them, the file resting beside him. "I've been going over the reports from the night Chloe died," he began, his tone flat. "I need you to walk me through it. From the moment you got on scene. Larson cleared his throat. Ed, you don't need to put yourself through this. I do, Ed said, and the finality in the word made Larson blink. Why did you send the ambulance to Memorial? Larson exchanged a quick glance with Briggs. It was a judgment call. In the moment, we knew it was Chloe. We wanted the absolute best for her. We thought Phelps, with his background. We thought he was the better choice for a tough trauma. Dr. Thorne was the on-call trauma surgeon at County, Ed said quietly. He was prepped and waiting. A protocol is County for major trauma. You know that. Protocols aren't everything, Ed, Briggs chimed in, his voice strained. We were thinking about what you would want. A steady hand. Someone you could trust. Ed looked at him. Someone I could trust? Or someone you trusted? The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Larson's jaw tightened. What are you implying, Sheriff? Picked up the file. He didn't read from it. He just held it. The paramedic's report says you cited my preference. That I would want this. I never said that. I didn't even know where she was until you told me. He let that hang. So I'll ask again. Why Memorial? Why not County? Larson's face hardened into the stubborn mask Ed knew so well. We made a professional assessment. We stand by it. It was a tragedy, but it was not our fault. A professional assessment based on what? Ed's voice rose just a notch. The drumbeat in his head was getting louder. Based on the fact that you didn't like him? Based on the jokes you made in this very office? Based on the fact that Dr. Thorne was different, and that made him unreliable in your eyes? Briggs looked down at his hands. Larson's eyes flashed. This is about that? You're going to blame us for trying to do right by your daughter, and make it about him? My daughter is dead because she didn't get to the best doctor in time. Ed roared, the control finally snapping. The sound echoed off the walls. The best doctor was 12 minutes away. You sent her 20 minutes in the wrong direction. You lied to the paramedics. You lied to dispatch. And you stood in the rain, and you lied to my face. The truth of it, spoken aloud, filled the room like a poison gas. Briggs had gone pale. Larson just stared back, a defiant, wounded anger in his eyes, but no denial. The absence of the denial was the final terrible confirmation. Ed saw it all then. Not as a sheriff investigating his deputies, but as a father seeing the last moments of his child's life stolen by something small and ugly and stupid. It wasn't malice. It was worse. It was a casual, ingrained belief that their judgment colored by their dislike of a man who was not like them was more important than protocol, more important than expertise, more important than a young woman's life. The men he considered brothers had killed his child, not with their hands, but with their prejudice. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a vast, empty cold. Get out, he whispered. Ed, Larson started, get out of my office. You're both suspended. Effective immediately. Turn in your badges and guns to the desk sergeant on your way out. Do not speak to anyone. There will be an investigation. Now get out. They left, Briggs looking shattered, Larson walking stiff-backed, a man betrayed by the very loyalty he had corrupted. Ed Vance sat alone in the silence they left behind. The pillars of his community, the world he had built, were not just cracked. They were dust. The investigation was swift and brutal. The facts were undeniable. Larson was charged with manslaughter and official misconduct. In a plea deal, he confessed, his statement a dry legal document that did nothing to capture the cost. Briggs, who had followed Larson's lead, resigned and left town, his life also in ruins. Ed resigned as sheriff the day Larson was sentenced. He stood on the courthouse steps, a light rain falling like it had that night. Reporters shoved microphones toward him. He looked past them, at the gray sky. He didn't talk about bad apples. He didn't talk about one mistake. His voice, when it came, was rough and tired. I was the sheriff, he said. I was supposed to see the whole picture. I saw a team I trusted. I didn't see the rot in the foundation. A young woman died because the people sworn to protect her thought they knew better than the facts, because they valued their own biases over her life. I failed to see that. I failed to stop it. I failed my daughter. There is no badge that can fix that. He walked away from the microphones, down the steps, and into the rest of his life. Dr. Thorne left the county a month later. The hospital board finally approved the new equipment for the E. A quiet, bitter monument. Ed sometimes drives past the old office. He never goes in. He spends his days in the quiet house, trying to mend the broken pieces of his wife's heart, and living with the hollow space where his own used to be. The trust he had, the certainty, is gone. He is left with the unshakable knowledge that the blue line he spent his life upholding, the line he believed was there to protect, had become a wall. And on the other side of that wall, alone and waiting for help that took a wrong turn, was everything he ever loved.